insanity.
Depriving a person of light.
Some prisoners became so depressed that they would commit suicide or murder to escape their lives in the camp, meaning obviously killing themselves to get out of their situation. But in the cases where people were committing murder, it was specifically so that their deaths would be expedited, so they no longer had to deal with the torment of being in a situation where there was no light, there was no interaction except for a guard telling you what to do.
No sound, too. You're living in oblivion.
Yeah. The silent system where prisoners were not allowed to talk then became a problem. They were often put into solitary confinement and were made to wear hoods while around other prisoners. In Eastern State Penitentiary, where Capone was housed for a little bit, he was part of the silent system where people were literally going insane and developing different forms of psychosis because you can't deprive humans of that kind of thing. Not Port Arthur. But they were still employing a similar system. Free citizens that were living on that island were also known to be miserable or have strife in their life. A lot of people feel like it was because they felt the despair, the melancholy, and the pain that was coming from the prison and the souls that were already in there. And some people just think it was just a terrible time to live on that island. People visiting the island now still feel the melancholy and still feel the anguish and pain, but some of them also report it as tranquil. My brain kind of thinks it's because of the beautiful scenery that's around it. Like, who's mad at anything in Australia, let's be fair. Structures were built of sandstone and assembled by the convicts. The convicts, while they were working there, they had to go out and chop down trees for the timber. When they became too old or too sick to actually chop down the larger trees, were made to cut firewood. It was super hard work. It was chosen for its location, which is a naturally secure site. It is an island, so it is surrounded by water on all sides. There are large cliffs, but the officers also started rumors that it was shark infested so that people would be less apt to try to escape.
Aren't there sharks in the water around Tasmania?
I mean, there's sharks in the water pretty much everywhere. I feel like they were making it out to be like there's like 1,000 sharks and they're just ready to eat you. No contact from anyone that was outside of the island was allowed to come into the island to prisoners, so they had no visitors. But anyone that had to go there for any sort of trade reason, they were required to check their sails and oars so that there would be no way for the prisoners to jump on board and escape on any boat. There are some people that did try to escape, but a lot of them were apprehended. There's very few people that tried to escape. It's almost akin to Alcatraz level non-escape.
Yeah.
This is going to make Luka Magnotta better. It'll maybe put like a butterfly band-aid on it, you know? It doesn't stick super well, but you kind of look at it and giggle.
Scooby-Doo on my boo-boo.
Maybe boo-boo on a boo-boo.
I was just thinking that.
Why didn't they ever do that?
One might say it's better than the average Band-Aid.
This is like my favorite fact of the whole day. It's so good. I laughed so hard. Notable escapees are Martin Cash with 2 others, but my favorite, and I mean this seriously, is George Billy Hunt. Amazing. His escape was to disguise himself using a kangaroo hide and then fleeing, trying to look like a kangaroo. The only reason that he got caught is because the guards, they weren't getting enough rations and they were hungry. It's so good. It's so good.
So they were going to eat him.
But that was the thing. So they saw a kangaroo fleeing across the plains, and because they were hungry, tried to shoot it so that they would have meat to eat. And as they shot at him, he panicked and dropped his disguise, put his hands up, and turned himself and was like, "I'm so sorry. Please don't eat me."
That is crazy.
The fact that is not public knowledge, like I already didn't know it, is offensive to me, and I'm so happy about.
It's clever AF.
Oh, it's so good. But like I said, he did clearly surrender because he was like, "Please stop shooting at me and don't eat me." Okay.
He should have tried to disguise himself as something non-edible, like a giant spider.
I would definitely shoot at a giant spider, and I love spiders, just to see what it tasted like. I kind of want to just eat every kind of meat in the whole wide world.
Well, people do eat spiders.
I told you I tried to eat one when we were in Thailand, and I was told not to eat it because I would get sick, which is true. Thank you, Internet, for letting me know.
Not talking about it.
The prison was completed in 1853. The prison was built in a cross shape with exercise yards at each corner.
It's the haunted CrossFit.
Additionally, there was a hospital that was built and an asylum to house people that were mentally ill on the island. They also had a separate prison for the young boys they had on the island. Prisoners were required to attend a non-denominational service that was massively compulsory at least once a week at the church that was also on the island. Possum or Opossum Island, depending on who you are and what region that you are from, how you say it, was a small island that was near the actual island. They had realized that they needed a place to put their dead bodies, and it's another dead body island. So it's like Heart Island, which is my favorite, and I want to go so bad.
It's kind of like Paveglia?
Yep, totally. Yep, they had used it for a graveyard between 1833 and 1877. Prisoners buried there, and also officers and some military personnel as well. They renamed it the Island of the Dead.
That's such a fun name.
Because big duh. The only thing that's on the Island of Death is a jetty, a cottage, and a small shelter for mourners. In the 1830s, sometimes it was called the Dead Man's Isle.
Dreams do come true.
On the Island of the Dead, they have about 1,646 reported graves. Only the staff and military graves are marked, which is about 180.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Unmarked graves, not great for activity.
Well, and there's a lot of things. Actually, one of the first sightings happens on the Isle of the Dead. They would utilize convicts that were, we'll say, better behaved for the upkeep as groundkeepers and gravediggers on the island, but they were in complete isolation. It wasn't like they had wives or anyone that was living there with them, and when a new body would occur, they would go and dig the hole and then continue forth. There was a senior living facility, not old senior, but senior in ranking, that was away from the prisoners. Any of the officers and or the guards that were of higher ranking would be on this particular area, and they called it the Civil Officers Row. In 1848, the junior medical officers' home was built as a way to tend to the officers and soldiers. It was very close to the Civil Officers Row, but obviously the hospital treated the general populace. The first house that was actually built on the island was the commander's house, and it was built for the colony leader in 1833. Right now, because it is a tourist place, it does have about 250,000 visitors every single year. It's strange to look back at this history because they had actually torn down quite a bit when the prison was closed in 1877, because they started having less prisoners that were actually put there.
Yeah, so there wasn't as much of a purpose for it.
Right, or they had people with mental disabilities or older people that weren't able to continue being workers. They decided to close it down, which meant that after a while, it was opened up to other people to bury the past. So a lot of people bought that land specifically to try to get rid of all of the bad stuff that they were hearing about the prison, and they would tear down some of the buildings.
Wow.
Yeah. In 1927, the town was reverted from Carnarvon, which is what they started calling it instead of Port Arthur, because it was associated with the prison and the penal colony. In 1927, it was reverted from Carnarvon to Port Arthur again, because they recognized the ability for it to become a tourist destination.
Oh, okay, of course.
Before that, in 1916, the Scenery Preservation Board took over ownership and would buy back some of the areas from people that had bought real estate on the island. And in the 1970s, the National Parks and Wildlife Service did actually take over that role. The reason that they're putting so much money into it, besides the amount of tourists, is because it is an island, and unfortunately it's being affected by global warming. Fuck you if you don't believe in it, and I'm sorry for you, but damn, for real though, it is in danger of actually being put under the ocean with the rising water levels. We talked about that the gravediggers were prisoners, but normally the ones that seemed like they could be stable enough to live on their own on an island.
One gravedigger at a time?
One person living on an island, like a smaller island, but
on an
still
island full
island
of corpses.
Of corpses, yes.
Oh, that makes that a whole world more terrifying.
And they had signal fires and stuff like that. It was something that the officers would inform them if there was some sort of trouble, that they sent up a signal fire, they would see it, and they would come over and look. And they hadn't seen a ton of signal fires happening, but when Mark Jeffrey was there by himself on the island, they saw a signal. He's described as a giant and burly man who was found curled up with fear. So a giant, burly, like lumberjacky type human who's a hardened criminal because he had been brought to this place.
Yeah, my kind of guy.
He said that the previous night, his hut had shook violently. There was a red glow. He smelled sulfur. And he said, this is a quote, "His satanic majesty eyes glowed red with heat as the stench of sulfur engulfed him in smoke." It got to a point where he was legitimately refusing to delineate from that story, period. For a giant man to panic that much and stick consistently to the story that Satan came. And he even went so far to describing that his horns and how they actually bent and the smell of the sulfur and the way the smoke curled around him.
The brimstone. That's really unsettling.
People that visit the island feel cold spots, touches. They see orbs and moving lights at weird times of day, even sometimes in the day or twilight. Workmen have been known to flee buildings when they were doing reconstruction efforts. After poltergeist activity, people see a weeping lady in blue, see a disembodied face in the dissection room under the surgeon's house, and a little boy crying.
Wait.
Jackpot!
So rewind? Did you say the dissection room?
Yep. It was underneath the surgeon's house. It's the same as we do now for autopsies. I don't think he was just grabbing people like frogs in a biology class in high school.
That's a terrible name for a room.
I know. In the dissection room, since we're talking about it right now, people feel like the stone walls exude a closing in feeling. Faces seem to bleed through the walls and peer at them from the corner of their eyes. And this is the faces looking like paintings in Scooby-Doo, peering at you from the corners of their eyes, and then will slowly disappear back into the wall. There's an old sheep skull on slab that's in the middle of the room that moves on its own. Some people think it's just rats or mice that might be moving it.
Okay, well fine. Explain that away all you want, but how the hell you gonna explain to me all these weird faces in the stone walls, okay?
A tour guide recounts a World War II veteran who was, quote, grizzled, that he had wandered into a room a little bit away from the group before the group actually got to the room, and they found him completely unconscious from panic and fear.
Not today, Satan.
Yeah, well, literally. Children are heard laughing and sometimes singing songs or playing games all over the island, oftentimes in the houses that remain. People experience footsteps up and down the stairs that sound smaller in size. In one case, someone said that it sounded like they were playing hopscotch outside. There is a man that's referred to as John Gould, who is, quote, a nasty character who's been spotted leering at people over the years.
Oh.
There's a bell tower that is attached to the church. The church bells in that tower ring by themselves, despite not having a clapper to ring and no ability to do so. They ring at different times, whether it be day or night. And the only bells that are still attached with a clapper are inside of a glass case at the base of the church, with no ability to actually ring them.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's so amazing.
Because it wouldn't be one of my stories without ghost children or fires. In 1884, there was a fire. There's actually multiple fires on the island. When they were repairing it, there's a legend, and it's something that's actually pretty widely believed, that two convict workers that were restoring the building had gotten into a brawl, and one man had killed the other one with a pickaxe. I saw a report that he was stabbed and then thrown out the window of the bell tower. I've seen a report that his head was banged, but this is the most widely believed reference, is that he was killed with a pickaxe. The thing about that is that most of the island is actually covered in ivy. When they were going in for restoration efforts, they had to trim a lot of the ivy or pull it off of some of the buildings because it's a naturally occurring item out there.
It makes sense, yeah.
A lot of people say that the ivy will not grow on the area where he hit his head or the area where his blood would pool underneath his body.
Oh.
At all.
Wow.
They see lights that come from the church, not only in the bell tower. Obviously, we can't talk about a church without talking about the Reverend. He is by far the most seen ghost on the island. There are pictures of him. They've had them studied, and from what they can see, they haven't been retouched at all. A lot of people see him, and without having actually any knowledge of the history, will approach a tour guide to ask about the man that was dressed in a very long brimmed hat and a long coat. Every single one of them, when being shown a picture of the Reverend, will say, yeah, that's